Hey y'all, welcome to the Purpose Looks Good podcast. I'm your sis, Lisa K. Satchel, and I'm here to help you walk in purpose. Listen, first episode out the gate, we finna talk about church hurt. Now, let me explain. I've been going to church my literal entire life. Like, as long as I literally have memories, I've been going to church. So I love the church. However, I've experienced so many different forms and varieties of church hurt that I feel qualified to talk about this and how to overcome it and how to work through it and how to keep trusting God through it and not let your church hurt affect your relationship with God. Because I'm going to cut to the chase a little bit. People are flawed. People are people. People be peopling. But God be Goddin', and he's that guy. So I'm going to share an experience I went through recently. It's probably the biggest form of church hurt I've ever experienced. And then I'm going to talk about working through it, tell y'all what happened. This is not to spill tea. This is really just to share and hopefully share my testimony. Hopefully that it'll impact you and you can feel related to, you can feel seen. This is not to bash anybody, any place, any person, literally. It's just to talk about my experience, my testimony, and relate it to you and to help you work through any church hurt you may have experienced. So now we got that out the way. Let's get into the episode. Let's talk. So I started working at a church in July of 2022 as a social media director. When I tell you she was excited, at the time I was a month away from finishing my Master's of Divinity in church ministry in the digital age. So I was like, next step is working at a church. God, sign me up. Where are we going? I thought I'd be moving back to Los Angeles to work at the church home that I had there. But instead, God was like, I think you should be at this church. Like, he showed this church to me, revealed it to me. And I was like, okay, this is great. I want to work here. I started attending, all that good stuff. In July 2022, boom, we're working at the church. I was so excited. I was so happy. Working there was a lot. It was a growing church, a booming church. God was doing a lot there, so keeping up with it was sometimes hard. But through it all, I really think the Holy Spirit enabled me a lot and was breathing on my work there. We had viral clips. We had growing platforms, all these things that I didn't even know I was capable of, and I wouldn't have been without God, but all these things that I honestly didn't know I was capable of. At the time, I don't know about now, but at the time they were like, that is the most growth they had seen. So I was like, okay, Holy Spirit, we're here, we're doing it. So in August of 2023, I got written up for not responding to a DM within 24 hours. Personally, I did not know this was a rule. Again, I was meeting all my KPIs. Things were going great. Key performance indicators. Everything was going great. So I thought, oh, I'm doing great. And mind you, I'd had a performance review a month earlier in July, because it was 1 year, July 2023. And I was like, okay, great. I'm doing great. That's what I was told. To keep growing as a leader, all that good stuff. Those are the main notes I got. But nothing about my actual job performance. So in a one-on-one with my executive pastor, I went in to talk to him about it, and basically we weren't talking about it. I wanted to talk about it, but we were talking about just a check-in about how things were going, upcoming projects, all that, normal run of the mill. But then I was like, hey, I'd like to talk about this. And I didn't know when I started that conversation how it would end, but basically it ended with me no longer working there. It was basically saying, there's a level we need you to be at this time, and you're not necessarily there. So either you need to work hard to get there and you're going to apply yourself, whatever you're going to get to that point, or this may not be it for you anymore. And I was feeling a lot of things because I felt a lot of pressure from that job. I was honestly exhausted, and I had just realized that I had been putting the job and the works before my relationship with God at certain points. So I was like, okay, can I have a pastoral moment? And he was like, of course. And I said, I don't know if this is it long term. And I feel like the picture that was being painted for me was like, you can build a team under you. You're going to grow here. You're going to basically that I would stay as social media director, whatever the title would evolve to. But I would stay in social media for the duration of a long time. And I know that God was calling me to other parts of ministry and to other outside projects that just did not have the time to be done. So I was just like, this isn't matching up. This doesn't feel right. So when I was told, hey, maybe this isn't for you, I was like, you know what? Maybe it's not. So one of the things that was said to me was, I need you thinking about this 6 days a week. Like, this needs to be your obsession. Like, you're going after it. And I had to tell them, like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, I don't know if I can give that. And so he was like, all right, here's the thing. Think about it. Take the weekend, because it was like a Wednesday or a Tuesday, something like that. Take the weekend, take the rest of the week to think about it. We'll come back and you decide on Monday, do you want to be done with this, or do you want to move forward and work hard to get to the point that we need you at? And I said, okay, I'll take the weekend. So I leave the office to decompress. I start talking to my friend who's also on staff, and I get a phone call to come back into the office to talk to my executive pastor. So I go back into the office, and he's like, I can sense that this has been something that has been happening for months for you. Like, you don't know if this is long-term it. And I think we should just make the decision right now. Do you basically I felt made to decide right in that moment, do I want to quit or do I want to stay? And I signed a mutual termination agreement, which meant that this was a mutual decision. I want to leave. They're allowing me to leave, whatever. I got severance. It was nice. I appreciated that because your girl was unemployed for a little bit, so that helped a little bit. Anyways, but I think that none of that, I think actually everything I've said so far didn't really hurt. It was more just like, okay, I feel like this is what's happening. Like, I feel like this is direction God is moving things. I don't know what's next, but it is what it is. Towards the end of this conversation, he was like, okay, so what we're going to do next is obviously he was like, you can stay a member of the church, you're still a part of the church family, all that great stuff. So I said, okay, cool. I'll just keep coming to this church. And he was like, yeah, we can get you on a team, and I'll call me in like 2 weeks, take a week to relax. Then the next week, just call me and we'll talk through your next steps. And I know, like, basically he was like, I can see you preaching and leading. Like, what does that look like for you? We'll talk through it. What team can you join? All this good stuff. And I said, oh my gosh, this sounds so great. Like, I can leave this and not feel the pressure of this, but also be like pastored into my next thing. This sounds great, right? So a week goes by. I cried harder than I've ever cried because I felt like everything I knew was over. I have no plan past this. Plan was to get a job at a church and work at a church for the rest of my life, basically. Different churches, so be it. But that was the plan, and that felt like it had shattered. So me and God were working through some things. I was working through some things, like face hurt crying, like random spurts of crying. Just like it was a lot to process. So then I called my former executive pastor, and he didn't answer. I was like, oh, maybe he's just busy. I texted him like, hey, are we still good to talk this time? Because I'd set up a time to talk with him. And he said, oh, I'll call you tomorrow. I said, okay. Next day comes, he doesn't call. Text him, no response. So I felt very much ghosted by that person. And then on top of that, the people I had thought of as family and community, it was like once I was no longer on staff, we weren't speaking, we weren't hanging out, all that. And I had to, at some point after processing and healing and all that, I had to realize we were just coworkers to an extreme. We were coworkers who cared about each other and checked in with each other, but we were coworkers. So I stopped taking it personally at that point, but I did realize that it felt like my family and my community was taken away from me because I was no longer working there and I was no longer giving my gifts. It was like, oh, if you're not going to volunteer, if you're not going to work here, what do we have to talk about? So it was very confusing. It was a lot to work through. So now here we are. I no longer attend that church. I found a new church home, but we're going to talk about all that and get through all of that. But I wanted to get through that story to basically share, if you're going through some form of church hurt, your girl's been there recently. Like, this all happened a year ago. So I hear where you're coming from. It didn't take a full year to process, but it took a good part of a year to get over and process because I had given so much of my life there for a year that I felt like, now what? Where do I go? What are these relationships? I had to work through a lot of what are these relationships and what do they look through now? And I think that was the hardest part for me. But yeah, so let's talk about basically how to move forward after church hurt, because that's the point of this episode. So the first thing we need to do is separate people from God. A lot of times when we experience church hurt, our first instinct is to be like, God, what's good? Like to blame it on God or to let it affect our relationship with God. I can say the past few times I've experienced church hurt, it has only made me turn to God more and grow my relationship with God more because I need to understand what happened. You hear what I'm saying? And I know the only one who knows is God because the math don't be mathing, especially with the situation I just explained to you. It's very confusing at first. You know that whole thing like God will cause everything to work together for the good of those who loved him and are called according to his purpose? Like, purpose looks good. Oh my God. Anyways, but like God will make it all work together. And we have to trust that and believe that. And in trusting that and believing that, we have to separate people from God. God may have allowed it, but he may not have caused it. And even if it was, like, again, explaining my situation, I fully believe my time serving there and working there was up. I can feel that and believe that. A small part of this is I got baptized in June. So 2 months before this all happened, I got baptized because I felt like I was making the job itself an idol. And I said, God, I don't want to do that. And I got baptized. And I can honestly say separating people from God in this situation looked like, God, I think this was your timing, but I don't think the way that I was treated was part of your plan. In the aftermath, I don't think that was part of God's design for church, but people are people. People are flawed. People are figuring it out, just like you're figuring it out. So we have to allow them space to do that and go to God to understand what happened to us and how are we supposed to process it. But don't let what happened to you at a church affect the way you feel about God. God is perfect. God is all-knowing. God would never do anything to hurt you. He would only do something to grow you. So if we go through anything, if God allows certain things, for me, the next step is, God, what is this supposed to produce? How are we supposed to grow from this? How is my relationship with you supposed to get better from this? So that's something to consider. So the best way to build your relationship with God past church hurt is to study his character. Study God's character in the Bible. The Bible is filled with scriptures and stories through other people's experiences that just reveal the character of God and how to experience his presence, how to experience his love. And so the first thing I would do, that if you don't know some off the top of your head, or you don't know some stories, or you don't know some scriptures about God's character, is to just go on to Bishop Google, google.com. We all know him. Know her if you would like. And basically just Google scriptures about God's character. One of my favorite things is God is love. Rev, run. Just kidding. But God is love. And knowing that God is love makes me then go to the scripture about love is patient, love is kind, love never boasts, all that good stuff. And so if God is love, when I look up descriptions of love, I can understand more of God. So that's one of my favorite ways to understand God is his character. It keeps no record of being wrong. My God, today I could go in, but I'll stop right there. And another thing to do is to check your personal track record. I know good and well God did not bring me this far to leave me. I know there are times where I was like, we need to get out of this, and I need your help. And God has done that. God has helped me. And so I just knew that even when I became unemployed, I was like, I've been unemployed before. He did it before. He'll do it again. I felt like, I don't know what's going to happen next before. And God came through and did things I couldn't even imagine. So I can't wait to see what he does next. Literally, one of my favorite things to do when I'm just like, everything is everywhere. I'm kind of in one of those things right now. I'm like, God, you have so much space to do a miracle. Like, what is going on? I feel out of sorts, but I know that you have so much space to move and do a miracle because of this. So just let me get on track. Where are we trying to go? So just check your personal track record, study God's character, and separate people from God. So the next thing we need to do is process, heal, and look back with a sober mind. So heal with God. Like we talked about, allowing God into your situation, like, God, how do we get here? What is the next step? How does moving forward look? I think for me with my situation, the biggest thing I had to process was, Were there any points where the way I was feeling at that church were contributed to by me from my past experiences, and how much of it was that place? Some of it was that place, but a lot of it was I came up in the entertainment industry professionally at first, and not saying I'll never go back, but I think I would go back with a different mindset, because the mindset in entertainment is like, you give your all here. This is what you do here. This is your job. This is your life. A lot of people talk about how when you work in entertainment, you're giving up your entire life. So I made that place my entire life. I don't know if that was God's design. I don't think it is, because I know other people who work there who do not make it their entire life, who also I think I didn't fully understand it was a job. There are people who work there who fully understand this is a job, and it's a place I enjoy being, and it's my church, but they can separate all of that. I was like, this is my job, my church, and somewhere I like being. I'm giving everything I have to it and not having a life outside of here for real. And anything I did outside of it was tied to it. Like, I only had friends who went to that church. I tied my whole life into it, and I don't know if that was the healthiest thing, because when it was time to shift and pivot, I felt like everything was ripped away from me. And I think there are people who do tie their whole lives in it, but they do know that if I was no longer working here, if I was no longer going here, I would still have these friends. Like, they built their relationships outside of the context of the church, where I only had friends who were on my team that I was leading. And then once I was no longer leading that team, it was like, okay, what does our friendship look like now? Like, things like that had to happen. So I think that's one thing too, is just understanding, like, when you're healing with God, allowing him to come into the places and just like talk through what happened and how it happened. Also, I had an opportunity to look back on other things and heal from those things. I had been in toxic work environments before. Did I take some of those behaviors that I developed in those environments, such as being defensive, such as like thinking I had to overwork to prove things, such as like there are a lot of things that I carried from there into this new job that had to be worked out. And just healing with God to be like, yo, what happened and how did we get here? And I think this also, when you're at a church, right? Like, what church hurt have I experienced in the past that is informing how guarded I am here now, or how I don't want to go to church, or how, like, whatever it looks like for you. Understanding with God your past and your present, and asking him about your future, just processing it all with him. Which brings me to my second point, which is reconsidering your perspective. I had to get help, like sincere help. I felt like I didn't know what to do next. So I started working with a life coach. She was incredible. Funny enough, she actually used to go to the church that I grew up in, and that's when I first met her. And she was working with my mom. So now I had a fun life coach to work with who like kind of already knew some stuff, so it was like easy to talk to her. And she helped me consider so many things differently. And she helped me with the whole think about how can we process and move forward. And I'm so thankful for her. One of the things that really came out of our sessions was, what is the difference between being familiar with something and being comfortable with something? So right after I had been let go, I was starting to attend the church again. And she was like, that's very traumatic. Like, a lot happened to you there, when I explained it to her and explained everything that had happened. And she was like, a lot happened to you there. Like, why are you going back? I was like, well, I feel comfortable there. She was like, is it comfortable or is it familiar? And I said, wow. Because if I was honest, I wasn't comfortable. I knew that people knew that I was no longer working there, who weren't on staff, and they would look at me like, oh, haven't seen you in a while. But they didn't know that I wasn't working there anymore. I think there are still people who don't know that I don't work there anymore. It's neither here nor there. But they'd be like, oh, haven't seen you in a while. I'm like, yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know how to articulate, I'm no longer on staff. I'm trying to figure it out. Like, it was just so much at one time. And then also with people who were on staff, I started to feel awkward. Not because of them, but I was just like, I don't know what to say to you because I don't think anyone knows what happened to me. And also, very few people were actually informed that I was no longer on staff. It was just like one day I wasn't there. And so it was just very weird for me. I didn't know what my responsibility was to tell people, what it wasn't. Like, it was just very weird for me. So actually, I was not comfortable. What I was familiar and nostalgic. At the time, it felt easier to just try to figure it out where I was rather than try to find another church home. Because finding a church home is a whole thing that we're going to talk about probably in another episode, but it's hard. Like, it's a thing because you want to find somewhere you're comfortable. Also, if you've experienced church hurt, you're like trying hard to separate where you are from where you were. It's a whole thing. But anyways, I just didn't want to go through that. And I had felt like this is where God called me to. And so after praying about it again, reconsidering my perspective and going to God about it and hearing from God about it, I realized, okay, this actually isn't it anymore. And I don't need to basically, for lack of a better term, kind of torture myself by staying here and going through these uncomfortable situations for me. So I will say after some time, I do feel comfortable going there for like special events and stuff. I don't think I would become an attendee again. That would only have to be up to God. The last thing I want to talk about is letting go and moving on. Forgiveness and healing does not always mean you need to spin the block. You do not need to go back. Some things, it's like that was just for that season. It's time to move on. For church hurt purposes, maybe you just meant to be at that church for a season, and now it's time for the next thing. Maybe you were just meant to help them grow that ministry, and God is calling you somewhere else to grow another ministry. There's so many different things it could look like. I think I'm still figuring out exactly what my next season looks like, but I know that I value community and feeling loved as an individual rather than I value feeling like I can work here, I can serve here, and that's why I want to be here. So that's something that I'm looking for in my next church home that I'm really enjoying the process of growing in, and I'm thankful for it. So that brings me to my next point. You have to let go of the past so that you can receive what God is trying to do next. So if I had held on to people at churches are the worst, I don't want to serve in another ministry, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, because it's just going to hurt me. And I'm not going to say that I didn't try to do that. Holy Spirit had to call me out because I started attending a new church and I love it. I'm really enjoying it going there. And I joined like a small group and I have some friends. Like it's really developing for me and I love that. But God was like, okay, time to start serving. And I was like, you remember what happened last time? No. And if I serve, I'm not going to do it on social media or any other thing or anything I've done before because that didn't go well last time. And obviously, as conversation with God goes, when you are trying to be disobedient, it didn't go the way I started. Obviously, I changed my heart and my mind towards the end. So I went to talk to the person who's over the ministry that does social media and all that, and honestly hit it off with him in a great way. He introduced me to a girl who's around my age who also is doing social media, and that's growing, and I'm so excited for what that looks like in terms of next steps and all of that. But I had to get over my hurt, get over myself, honestly, to be open to receiving that and moving forward in that way, which was hard. So I want you to know that nothing I've talked about was easy. It took me a full year to be able to talk about this publicly. Everyone personal and close to me knows my story, knows what's happening, know how I've been going through this. However, most people don't know this full story because it was just hard to process and it was hard to share. And I'm not even going to hold y'all. Making this podcast today was even difficult. So I'm thankful for you guys for listening. And I hope this helps. I hope I wasn't just rambling. I hope you really got something out of it. And I'm so excited to grow this podcast, to grow this platform. This is a new chapter, and I'm so excited. And I can't wait to go on this journey with you. So thank you for listening. Listen, stay tapped in. You can follow the podcast and this platform at Purpose Looks Good on Instagram and TikTok. Follow me at Lisa K. Satchel on Instagram and TikTok. And all the other things are in the description, in the show notes, all that good stuff. If you have a question or something you want me to talk about, send an email to info@purposelooksgood.com. Again, info@purposelooksgood.com. Can't wait to connect with you guys. Can't wait to keep growing together. Let's go. Love you guys.